Hi, and welcome to English-Fabule. Are you learning English? Great. Let's learn English with a very interesting story. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. Let's get started.
An important meeting took place in Moscow, the capital of Russia. The date was April 25, 2025. Steve Witkoff traveled to Moscow to meet the Russian President Vladimir Putin. Mr. Witkoff works for the American President Donald Trump. He is a special helper trying to make peace. They met to talk about the war in Ukraine. This war started a few years ago and caused many problems. Many people were suffering. President Trump wanted the war to stop very soon. He promised voters he would end it quickly. He chose Mr. Witkoff, his friend and a businessman, to lead the talks for the United States. Mr. Witkoff and President Putin talked for 3 hours. Their meeting was in the Kremlin, a famous place in Moscow. This was not their first meeting. It was the 4th time they met since President Trump became president again in January. These meetings show that the American government was working hard to find peace. The talks happened at a difficult time. Just one day before, a Russian attack hit Kyiv, the main city in Ukraine. Many people were hurt or killed. On the same day as the meeting, a Russian army general was killed in an attack near Moscow. These events made the situation very tense. Even with these problems, the meeting seemed friendly. Russian news showed President Putin welcoming Mr. Witkoff with a smile. After the talks, Russia said the meeting was useful. They said it helped Russia and the United States understand each other better. They also talked about maybe having direct talks between Russia and Ukraine again. President Trump also seemed happy. He wrote online that it was a good day for talks. He believed that Russia and Ukraine were very close to agreeing on peace. He said the main points were already agreed. This meeting was very important for many countries. Everyone watched closely. They hoped this meeting could be a step towards peace. Ending the war in Ukraine is a big challenge. The world wanted to see if these talks between Mr. Witkoff and President Putin could help stop the fighting. 2. The war before. The problems in Ukraine did not start recently. They began many years ago. In 2014, Russia took a part of Ukraine called Crimea. Many countries around the world said this was wrong, but Russia kept control of Crimea. This was the beginning of big trouble between Russia and Ukraine. After Crimea, there was fighting in eastern Ukraine for years. But in February 2022, a much bigger war started. Russia sent many soldiers into Ukraine. They attacked from different directions. They tried to take the capital city, Kyiv. This was a full invasion of the country. The war was terrible for the people of Ukraine. Many soldiers and ordinary people died. Many more were hurt. Cities and towns were damaged by bombs and fighting. Homes, schools, and hospitals were destroyed. Millions of people had to leave their homes. Some moved to safer parts of Ukraine. Many others left the country and became refugees in other places. The war also hurt the economy badly. Ukraine's farms and factories were damaged. Russia's economy also suffered because other countries stopped trading with them. Life became very hard and sad for Ukrainians. The United Nations said hundreds of thousands of people were killed or hurt. Ukraine did not give up. The Ukrainian army fought hard to protect their country. President Volodymyr Zelensky asked other countries for help. Many countries in Europe and North America sent help. They gave Ukraine money, weapons, and other important things. With this help, Ukraine stopped Russia from taking Kyiv. They pushed the Russian soldiers back in some areas, but the fighting was still very difficult. By the start of 2025, the war had continued for 3 years since the full invasion. Russia still controlled Crimea. They also controlled large parts of eastern and southern Ukraine. This was almost 1/5 of the country. The fighting did not stop. Soldiers were dying every week. Bombs still fell on cities. There were some talks about peace before, but they did not work. Ceasefires did not last long. After 3 long years of war, many people were tired. Ukrainians were tired of the danger and sadness. Russians faced problems too because of the war and sanctions from other countries. Countries helping Ukraine were spending a lot of money. Everyone hoped the fighting would stop soon. People wanted peace, but it was hard to find a way to end the war that both sides could agree on. The situation was difficult, and a solution was needed quickly. 3. A new plan for peace. Donald Trump became the President of the United States again in January 2025. He made a very big promise during his election campaign. He told people he would end the long and difficult war in Ukraine very quickly. He even said he could do it in just 24 hours. Later, President Trump explained that this was an exaggeration, just a strong way to talk. But he was serious about wanting peace fast. He set a goal for himself: finish the war in his first 100 days in office. This put a lot of pressure on his team because it was a very short time to solve such a big international problem. To lead this important task, President Trump chose someone special. He did not pick a person who worked in government politics or diplomacy for many years. Instead, he chose his friend Steve Witkoff. Mr. Witkoff was a very rich businessman, a real estate magnate who owned many buildings. He and President Trump were friends for a very long time, since the 1980s, and sometimes did business together. Mr. Witkoff became the U.S. Special Envoy. This was his official title. It meant he was President Trump's main person for the peace talks. He became the principal channel, the main connection between the U.S. government and the Russian government, especially President Putin. It was a very powerful position, but Mr. Witkoff was new to this kind of work. He had no formal experience as a diplomat before this job. Mr. Witkoff immediately started his work. He traveled often between countries. He flew to Moscow for meetings with Russian leaders. He went to Kyiv to speak with the Ukrainian government. He also visited European capitals like London and Paris to talk with America's allies. People noticed his style was different. He was known for being very direct and blunt, like a businessman trying to make a deal quickly. Some observers thought this direct style might be useful in talks with President Putin. However, many people were worried about this new plan. Some experts and politicians in the US and Europe questioned if a businessman without diplomatic training was the right choice. They worried Mr. Witkoff did not have enough deep knowledge of foreign policy or the complex history of the conflict. Critics felt he did not have enough policy expertise and might not understand all the risks or could be too easily influenced. They were concerned he might push for a deal that helped Russia too much and hurt Ukraine. Despite these worries, President Trump showed strong trust in his friend. The world watched as Witkoff tried to make peace before the 100-day deadline ran out. 4. The Moscow talks. On April 25, 2025, an important meeting happened in Moscow. Steve Witkoff, President Trump's special helper for peace talks, went to the Kremlin. He met Russian President Vladimir Putin. This was the fourth time they met since President Trump started his job again in January. The U.S. government wanted to end the war in Ukraine quickly. President Trump had promised to do this in his first 100 days, and that time was getting short. The meeting was long. Witkoff and Putin talked for 3 hours. Witkoff is a businessman, not a normal government helper for talks like this, but he was leading the effort for Trump. Russian news showed pictures of the meeting. Putin smiled and welcomed Witkoff with open arms. They sat at a big white table to talk. Putin had helpers with him too. His foreign policy helper Yuri Ushakov and another helper, Kirill Dmitriev, were there. After the meeting, Russia gave some information. Ushakov told reporters the talks were good and helpful. He said the meeting helped Russia and the United States understand each other more. They talked about Ukraine and other world problems. Ushakov also said they talked about maybe starting direct talks between Russia and Ukraine again. Russia and Ukraine had not held direct talks to end the fighting since the first weeks of the war in 2022. This could be a big change. President Trump also spoke about the meeting. He wrote online that it was a good day for talks and meetings. He said Russia and the U.S. were very close to a deal. Trump thought the two sides should meet soon at a high level to finish the agreement. He wrote that they agreed on most big points, but this meeting happened at a very difficult time. Just one day before, on April 24th, Russia attacked Kyiv, the capital of Ukraine, with missiles. This bad attack killed 12 people and hurt more than 90 others. President Trump said he was not happy about this attack. He wrote online, "Vladimir, stop. Let's get the peace deal done." Also, on the same day as the Moscow meeting, something else bad happened. A top Russian general, Lieutenant General Yaroslav Moskalik, was killed. He was an important person in the Russian army. He died when his car exploded near Moscow. A homemade bomb caused the explosion. Nobody said they did it. This happened only hours before Witkoff met Putin. It made the situation for peace talks even more difficult. These events showed that the war was still very dangerous, even while leaders talked about peace. The talks in Moscow were a big step, but many problems and dangers were still there. 5. Two peace plans. People trying to make peace did not all agree on the best way. The United States had one idea for a peace plan. But Ukraine and countries in Europe had a different idea. These two plans showed big differences in how they wanted to end the war. Finding one plan that everyone liked was very difficult. The American plan, presented by Steve Witkoff, had clear points. It said Russia could keep Crimea. Russia took Crimea from Ukraine in the year 2014. The plan also suggested that the world should accept that Russia now controlled other parts of East and South Ukraine that its army held. This is called de facto recognition, accepting something is true in practice, even if not officially agreed by law. Another important part of the U.S. plan was about money rules, called sanctions. Many countries put sanctions on Russia because it started the war and took land. The US plan said these sanctions, even old ones from 2014, would stop. Finally, the plan said Ukraine could not join NATO in the future. NATO is a group of countries that promise to protect each other if one is attacked. Ukraine and its friends in Europe had their own plan. Their idea was different in many important ways. First, they wanted the fighting to stop completely, everywhere. This is called a ceasefire. Only after a full ceasefire, they said, should talks about who controls the land begin. Their plan did not say Russia could keep any Ukrainian land it had taken. It was very important for them that Ukraine stayed safe in the future. They wanted very strong promises, like a special agreement, to protect Ukraine from future attacks. This was similar to the promise NATO countries have, called Article 5. This promise means if one country is attacked, others must help defend it. For sanctions, the European and Ukrainian plan said they should only stop slowly. Sanctions would only end after there was real, lasting peace, not just because a deal was signed. The biggest problem was the land. The US plan seemed ready to give land to Russia. President Trump said Crimea would stay with Russia, but Ukraine strongly disagreed. President Zelensky said Ukraine's constitution clearly states that all its land belongs to Ukraine, including Crimea and the other areas Russia took. Ukraine felt it could not give away parts of its country. This disagreement about who controls the land was a major block to peace. Giving land to a country that took it by fighting is against international rules. Some European countries worried about the American plan. They thought the US government was trying to make a deal too quickly. They were afraid that the US might agree to something that was bad for Ukraine in the long term. They felt the US team was under pressure to get results fast. Because of these worries, European countries worked with Ukraine to make their own different peace proposal. They wanted to make sure Ukraine's needs were protected. They believed stopping the fighting first was the most important step before deciding difficult things like borders. 6. Many worries. The peace talks between the US and Russia made many people worried. Not everyone was happy with the plans being discussed. Different groups had different concerns about the possible peace deal. Ukraine was maybe the most worried. The US plan, brought by Steve Witkoff, suggested Russia could keep Crimea. It also suggested Russia could keep other parts of eastern and southern Ukraine that it controlled. President Zelensky strongly disagreed. He said Ukraine would never give away its land. He stated that Ukraine's constitution clearly says Crimea and all other areas belong to Ukraine. Accepting the US plan seemed impossible for the Ukrainian government. They felt it was against their country's laws and future. Leaders in European countries also felt anxious. They thought President Trump and Witkoff were moving too fast. They worried the US wanted a deal quickly, maybe because of Trump's 100-day promise. Europeans feared this rush could lead to a bad agreement for Ukraine. They worried Ukraine would not be safe in the future. European countries had their own ideas. They wanted fighting to stop completely first. Only after a real ceasefire should talks about land happen. They also wanted very strong safety promises for Ukraine, almost like NATO protection. And they believed sanctions on Russia should only stop much later, when peace was truly stable. Some people inside the United States also had doubts. Steve Witkoff was President Trump's friend and a businessman, not an experienced diplomat. Some questioned if he truly understood the complex problems or if he could negotiate effectively with Putin. There were worries he might agree too easily with Russia's demands. His positive comments about the talks worried those who were skeptical of Russia's intentions. Trust was a major problem, especially because Russia did not stop its attacks. Just before Witkoff met Putin in Moscow, Russian missiles hit Kyiv, killing people. A Russian general was also killed in a bombing near Moscow. These violent acts happened during peace talks. This made Ukraine and its friends wonder if Russia was serious about peace or just using the talks for other reasons. It was hard to negotiate when the attacks continued. So while President Trump said they were close to a deal, many serious worries remained. Ukraine refused to give up land. Europe wanted a slower, safer process. Some Americans doubted their own negotiator, and Russia kept fighting. These big problems showed that finding real peace would be very hard. 7. A big problem for the world. The peace talks between Russia and the United States are very important. They are not just about Ukraine and Russia. They matter for every country in the world. The decisions made now will affect many people and places for a long time. The world is watching carefully to see what happens next. This is more than just one war. It is about the future rules for everyone. A very big question comes from these talks. Can a country use its army to take land from another country? Russia took Crimea in 2014. Now it controls more parts of Ukraine. If a peace deal lets Russia keep this land, it sends a message. It might tell other countries that using soldiers to take land is okay. This is a serious problem for peace everywhere. Many countries believe that borders should not be changed by fighting. This situation tests the rules that countries agree to follow. International law says that taking land by force is wrong. The idea is called territorial integrity. It means a country's land belongs to it, and others should respect its borders. If the peace deal accepts Russia keeping Ukrainian land, it could weaken this important rule. It might make the world less safe because powerful countries might think they can ignore the rules. The peace talks are also a test for the United States. The U.S. has many friends and allies around the world. These countries trust the U.S. to help protect them and support international rules. If the U.S. makes a deal that seems bad for Ukraine, its friends might worry. They might ask if the U.S. will keep its promises in the future. The trust that other countries have in the U.S. is important for global stability. Money rules like sanctions are also part of this problem. Many countries put sanctions on Russia after it started the war. These sanctions were meant to punish Russia and stop the fighting. The U.S. peace plan suggests lifting these sanctions. If sanctions are removed easily, even if Russia keeps the land it took, it changes how sanctions work. Other countries might think sanctions are not a strong tool anymore. This affects how countries deal with future problems using money pressure. What happens in Ukraine directly affects safety in Europe. A peace deal could change the balance of power there. European countries worry about Russia being strong and possibly aggressive in the future. They want strong safety promises for Ukraine. They also worry if the U.S. might make decisions without thinking about Europe's safety. The security of the whole European continent is connected to this peace process. Finally, the result of these peace talks could change how countries act everywhere. If Russia gains land through war and faces few long-term problems, other countries might learn from this. Some leaders might think that using force is a good way to get what they want. This could lead to more conflicts in other parts of the world. What happens in Ukraine is a big test for the international order, the system that tries to keep peace between nations. The outcome will shape future international relations. 8. The future. Right now, peace has not come to Ukraine. The talks are very difficult. There is no final agreement yet between Russia, Ukraine, and the United States. They still do not agree on the most important things. One big problem is land. The U.S. plan suggests Russia could keep Crimea and some other areas it controls now. This plan would also stop the money rules, called sanctions, against Russia, and Ukraine would promise not to join the NATO safety group. But Ukraine and European countries have a different idea. They say the fighting must stop first. Then they can talk about who controls the land. They do not want to promise now that Russia can keep Ukrainian land. They also want very strong promises that Ukraine will be safe in the future. They think sanctions should only stop much later, when there is real peace. These different ideas make agreement very hard. Another big question is what happens next. Maybe Steve Witkoff will continue his talks. He might keep traveling and trying to find new ideas everyone can accept. Maybe Ukraine and Russia can start talking directly to each other again. This has not happened for a long time. Direct talks could be helpful, but they could also be very difficult without help from others. Or maybe the United States will stop trying to make peace. President Trump wants a deal very quickly. If there is no agreement soon, the U.S. might decide to stop the peace talks. If the U.S. stops, it is unclear who could lead the effort or if the war might get worse. While leaders talk, the war goes on. Every day more people are killed or hurt. Families lose their homes and safety. Cities are damaged by bombs. The need for peace is very strong and urgent, but the disagreements are deep. Finding a solution that everyone accepts seems very far away. Nobody knows for sure if these peace efforts will work. Nobody knows when the fighting might end. The future is uncertain for Ukraine, for Russia, and for the world. What do you think is the best way to find peace?
Hey there! Just a second before you go. If you learned something new today, please give this video a like, write your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. It only takes a second, and it really, really helps to create even better English videos for you. Your support means the world. Thank you.